I don't know how to act or react to that. I'm on the young side too, so you could just call me by my name. I'm not a fan of titles. I don't think I heard everybody say I'm an architect, I'm an MSc student of that. That you were someone before you decided to study architecture. You'll be someone if you decide to stop studying architecture today. As much as you can, don't let yourself be roped in by titles. It's nice to be here and meet everyone. Um, it would be nice if this session was very interactive, right? Because I don't believe anybody um has it all figured out. And I think that's the beauty of the industry, right? That we have numbers and everyone is equally capable, equally intelligent, as gifted. So when we pull resources together, we can do really amazing things. So just to kick it off, I'll read some few statistics for us here, right? Africa's population is the fastest growing globally. By 2050, the continent will host 25% of the people on Earth, creating both labor pressure and economic potential, problem and opportunity. Over 60% of Africans are under the age of 25, producing a large future workforce that becomes either a demographic dividend or a structural liability. Problem, opportunity. Less than 50% of Africans have reliable access to electricity, internet, which constrains productivity and quality of life. Opportunity, problem. Rapid urbanization is underway. Urban populations have risen from 30% in 1990 to over 40% today, stressing housing, transportation, water, and planning systems. Opportunity and problem. Um, Infrastructure gaps significantly increase the cost of doing business. If anybody here, even if it's something as simple as what you own a printing shop, imagine if you were running on electricity and you didn't have to buy diesel or generator or whatever. So this is what's saying. That's what it's saying. Infrastructure gaps significantly increase the cost of doing business, with transport and logistic costs far above global average, reducing competitiveness. Problem slash opportunity. So, um, the reason why I mentioned all of these is if you pay attention, those are all spheres in which architects can influence, right, and prefer solution. Because ultimately, the job of a professional in our industry is to guide, supercharge, direct infrastructural or developmental growth that would support the ecosystem. When I say ecosystem now, I mean people, plants, economy, countries, whatever you name it. There are so many tools today that it is very easy to get carried away to where you are struggling to keep up. Everybody's thinking, what should I learn to stay relevant? What tool can I learn to stay relevant? And in the midst of all of this, in fighting for relevance, we have moved our focus or gaze from what is really important to being an architect to focusing on things that are after the fact, right? So architecture is not constrained by lack of software skills. It is constrained by lack of thinking quality. And if you would agree with me today, you would see tools or technology. But technology and tools have made it virtually easy for just about anyone to do the things you think you know how to do, right? Digital tools have become accessible, standard, and very, very learnable. It's very easy to learn anything today. And because of this very reason, your software proficiency alone is not going to be enough to help you stand out as a professional. And depending on where you fall into in your professional journey, early stages, it might be an important differentiator, right? But as you advance in your career, it starts to become less and less relevant. So the real failures in architecture are not about are not technical, right? So it's a we if you check out, you'll notice that the issues we're having are arising from poor framing slash understanding of problems, shallow understanding of context, and weak decision making under constraints. Right? Um, what does this mean? It means very often, and if we can be honest with each other, you would find what happens is better still. Let's pause and do this. I'll ask, when was the last time anybody here got a brief and then instead of going to LinkedIn, sorry, I said LinkedIn, Pinterest, or whatever platform it is people use to source for ideas these days, you paused and said, why is this project important? Why should I do this? Why is this person trying to? Or better still, let me not give you away the answers. Let's do it this way. When you get a brief, what are the first questions you ask? Does anybody want to go? Or should I pick at random? I'll pick at random. Adetunji, can we hear you?
Okay, so the question is, when you get a brief, what's the first thing you think about? Or is
Mm.
that, did I get that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yes, sir.
Basically, you don't have to think about the context. What's the context in which the project is existing in, or
Mm.
what are the thoughts that I want to birth the project? I don't want to wax too lyrically, but you have to first think about I think about the context.
Mm.
Okay, what is the site context?
Mm.
What is the environmental context?
Mm.
And what exactly is the client trying to achieve? And is it even worth it to pursue? But a lot of that boils down to context. But to answer honestly, because most of my work is in residential real estate, so
Mm.
most of the time I work with a lot of developers, and a lot of the time it's more or less money. But what is the maximum gain that they want to get from the project? So that's just to wax lyrically anyway.
Mm. Irene, I would love to hear you. Marvelous says, mostly, while I've no plenty like this. Where is the chat? And I was laughing at someone earlier. Life is interesting. Found it. Mostly, what's the scope of the project and what does the client want to achieve? And then what's the client's budget? Nice. Does anybody else want to go? Yusuf, I see your hand, Yusuf. Let's hear you. Irene, I was hoping you would say something. Yes, it's your Irene. Oh.
Anyway, I don't know. I'm actually here to learn. I don't know if I actually have anything to say to that.
Mm. Something some one of the lecturers taught us in school is he said, whenever you're asked a question, don't ever say you don't know. Even if you have to bubble, bubble.
Can you
And
repeat the question? Let me see if I have anything to say.
very
I
good.
remember the question.
When you get a brief, what's the first thing you do? What are the questions you ask? Wahab, I see you muting your mic. You want to say something? Okay, well,
Good evening, everyone.
evening.
Yeah, my name is Favor Yukon from Obafemi University.
Mhm.
Regarding the question, I
Mhm.
feel that when I get a brief, the very first question I would ask is why this brief? Like, what is the reason behind this? Um, then questions like, what problem does this project aim to solve? I think these are the first kind of questions I would ask. And then I'll
Mhm.
try and interpret the brief in my own words,
Mhm.
like just trying to understand what exactly the project is about
Mhm.
before I now start sourcing for information
Mhm.
about the particular typology of the project.
Thanks for that. Wahab, I see your hands up.
Okay. Hi everyone.
Mhm.
So I believe that after you've gotten your brief from your client, I believe the next step should be budget. You have to use budget. That's
For
what I
what?
believe. Is budget. Is
Sorry,
budget.
say again. So she said budget. I like that. Money is important. Odufa, please, I apologize if I butcher your name.
Good evening. It's Odufa.
Odufa.
I just want to
Hi,
say
Odufa.
hi. I have primarily worked on school projects, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So first of all, when I get a brief, I
Mm-hmm.
want to understand the user, just basically what the the brief is all about and who intends to use the building. But primarily, as a person, I look at the experience that I want people to have in that building, how I want them to feel when they
Mm.
come into that building, just the way they will live and move through the spaces personally. So those are things that I consider.
If you're really about what it says you say, I think your design will be interesting. Your answer has piqued my interest. Nice. Wahab, you were saying something before you dropped off.
I think the next thing is, aside from trying to understanding what he wants, this and that, the user's experience and everything, I believe the next thing is budget.
Mm.
Because after collecting brief, you can't just go back to your laptop or you start making researches without
Mm.
asking for budget. So I
Mm.
believe the budget will shorten the story. The budget will make you focus more on
Mm.
will make you know what is to do and what not to do. So you
Mm.
can't collect it and start making researches on a mansion, whereas the client actually wants two-bedroom bungalow. So
Mm.
some clients have put mouth. So I believe after understanding the brief and all of these back and forth, I believe the next thing is the budget. Just not the budget to help you to design in respect to whatever he has to pay. So I think that's my contribution. Thank you.
Okay. So, all interesting answers. I would love for someone to type in the chat so that I don't forget. Um, Someone should just help me type, why is a brief important? When I see it, I'll know what it is I wanted to say. So we'll come back to that at the end of these conversations, right? So we've all established, or we've initially established at least, or at least I established, I'm not sure if you follow, you guys established it with me, that software knowledge is not the differentiator we think it is, right? And we're arguing and saying that critical thinking is the major differentiator. So then you ask, what is critical thinking? Basically, is your ability to interpret incomplete and or conflicting information, establish relationships and understand trade-offs, translate intent into buildable systems, and then anticipate second and third order consequences, right? And interesting answers from all of you. When I get a brief, the first thing I do is establish all the constraints, right? Um, and in doing so, there are four operational dimensions you should be paying attention to. The first is contextual. The second is systems. The third is abstract. And the very last one is judgment. Now, under operational dimensions, you're thinking contextual intelligence, which is something that a lot of you said. What is the climate? What's the culture? What are the economics and the projects? What are political parameters to consider? Interesting story. I never really used to pay attention to politics until we were working on a project, right? And for obvious reasons, I can't give too much details. And what had to happen was they needed to relocate some people from a certain place so that they could make use of that land, right? In doing so, relocating them somewhere else, people will now realize there was already a chieftain slash village head there. So now what happens to the village head from where you're relocating them from? So basically you're taking a leader and you're plugging him somewhere. Now he has to be under someone. And that was the first moment I realized people are not just data or information, right? There's complexity attached to it. And I feel that was when I realized it's part of why it is very difficult to do things at a general slash large scale in Nigeria, because when you start understanding nuances of people and politics, it becomes an issue. Another point there is regulation, right? Building codes, the constitution itself, what is allowed, what isn't allowed. Another thing was something that Ud- sorry, Odufa said, which was user behavior, right? Other constraints to consider are structure, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Cost, time. How would you procure what it is you need to procure, and then human use, right? Then another thing you should be able to, another skill you should be able to possess under this critical thinking is, are you able to translate your intent slash ideas to diagrams? Are you able to translate those diagrams slash parameters to logic, spatial logic? Can you translate that logic to drawings? And then can you take drawings to construction? Another important arm, which is the fourth one, like we said, judgment. What to prioritize, what to simplify, what not to design at all, right? Next one I think we should look at is like the risk of thinking software slash tools first. If you've noticed something, I haven't been online in a while, but if you check some of what happens on Twitter, Instagram, people post their work and the first thing people ask is, what software did you use? This looks nice. What did you do to achieve this look? Right? I can almost never recount seeing any time where someone said or asked, hey, why did you do such and such and such? What was the reason behind so and so? And when you start to move from looking at things on the surface to trying to understand why, that's where you start to set yourself apart as an architect. When you understand the why behind something, right, you can break slash deconstruct and then recreate in your own way. For instance, I could have had, I walk into a house, the first space you see is the foyer, the next space you see is the dining. Typically, someone would be like, no, that's wrong. Da, 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 da. But if you ask why, you might realize it was a cultural issue. You might realize it was a client preference. You might have realized it was something that had to do with maybe topography, right? Or something that had to do with the building orientation. You get me? So learning to ask why and understanding systems, right, is basically how you start to set yourself apart as a professional. I would encourage, as you developed, be less obsessed with aesthetics and be more obsessed with understanding why and rationale and making judgments and establishing trade-offs, right? Something I think I learned last year was, I mean, I had always known it, but I hadn't known it deeply, was that for any time you say yes to something in design, you're saying no to something else. And if you cannot establish what you're saying yes and no to, then how do you know, or how do you evaluate your decision making throughout the project, right? So learning to establish constraints is very, very important. Another reason why you should prioritize critical thinking is because the market reality actually rewards critical thinking more than, I could argue and say, more than software competence. And for this, I would explain there's a nuance. At the initial stage of your career, maybe like to get your first job, yes, you will probably need maybe to know how to use Revit or AutoCAD or 3ds Max or whatever the case might be. But once you get to a certain level as a professional, people come to you with problems and they don't really care what tool it is you're using to solve those problems. It's more of, hey, I have this. Can you help me solve it? And here's a caveat. A lot of professionals think of architecture in terms of brick and mortar only. And I feel like that's what is costing us as an industry, right? Which would then lead to maybe another question I should ask. I would love to hear from people. Maybe let's say 3 people. Like, what is architecture?
Can I talk?
Yeah, sure.
Hello?
So for me, I think architecture has to do with designing a building, a workplace or anything
Mm-hmm.
where people live in or work. It has
Nice.
to do with structure. Yes.
Nice. Does anybody want to give a definition?
Okay, hello, sir.
Hello, sir. I can hear you, sir.
Uh, okay, what is architecture to me, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so architecture is like building systems that how would I put it? It is a way of an art of designing buildings and structures, uh, not necessarily because of aesthetics,
Mm.
um, functionality, and some other factors.
Okay. That's nice. Odufa, I'd love to hear your definition. Odufa, I apologize. You give me time to learn how to pronounce your name. Architecture is the science and art of designing a building in which the occupants and the users' daily life functions, feelings, and emotions that are expected to be. This is so technical. Thank you.
Hello.
My boss wants to define architecture for us. Hello, Jerry.
Good evening. I'll just see architecture as the um, art and science because I feel it combines both together. Or not only designing, but like imagine it also involves imagination of imagination, designing, constructing, and
Mhm.
the whole that of the built environment, not only buildings, landscape, and a whole lot of sometimes if you look at the metaverse, architecture has already transcended over the physical environment into the digital environment in terms of games, metaverse, and even in space self. Architecture is more like I feel it's more like imagination and critical thinking of bringing it to life too.
So, what is architecture? You said a lot.
Okay, architecture is like the art and science of imagining, designing, and bringing to life built structures, either in the physical or let me say either in the physical environment or in the virtual environment.
Mm. Architecture is the process of designing, ordering space to accommodate or contain human life and activity. Olu. Abraham, architecture is the art and science of designing, constructing buildings so they are functional, safe, and aesthetically pleasing for others. Abraham. Nolua says, allow me steal Louis Kant's definition. Architecture is the thoughtful making of spaces. Big question. Are you guys saying without buildings there is no architecture?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. So that's actually a very good question because most of us actually talked about buildings. And I would say that architecture has been around for a while, has been used in different contexts. I
Mm,
think now it's more used in computer, like technology or computing, that's computer architecture because
mhm.
of development of systems, AI, Web3, and everything. So I would say that architecture is the design of structure. And I'm saying structure because I don't just mean structure based on a building structure, but like structure based on um, structure can be how spaces should be. Structure can be how tiling should be. Structure can be how system of a program should be. Structure can be how uh, how the joinery of a chair. So I would really say that's architecture to me.
That's an intelligent answer. Thanks, man. Odufa, my favorite people with this place. Don't say something. I want to hear your definition of architecture. Basically, to architect, yeah, to avoid blabbing and long definition, is to prefer solutions, right? And unlike what most people understand, you could be an architect without, I apologize, I'll take that back. Unlike what most people think, architecture is not just limited to designing buildings, you could design systems, you could design solutions, you could design frameworks. There are projects we've done in the office where I didn't even touch AutoCAD or Revit. It was basically strategy, right? And designing systems and providing a solution. There are times where you have to even architect a system out of which the client will now create a brief and say, oh, okay, that means it's shopping mall we have to do, right? So ultimately, I've been reading off of a note before now, so I'm just going to dump the note since I'm done reading it now and freestyle and speak from my mind. Architecture has gone beyond the understanding of software, tools, CAD, whatever it is you want to mean. Architects today, the only way you can stand out is in your ability to prefer solutions. And here's what most people don't understand. Tools, technology, whatever it is a medium of expression, right? At the end of the day, you, the person, is always going to be the most important component of architecture. The most important component about you, the person, as it pertains to architecture, is your thinking faculty, right? How do you improve your ability to think and make decisions and rationalize and manage and handle constraints, or improve your ability to judge? One, of course, is practice, right? The more you work on complex things, the more you work on projects, the better it is you become, which is sort of like, this is me consoling or encouraging anyone who is a student here and feels like, oh, I'm just learning, oh, I'm just starting out, I don't really know much. Give yourself room to grow and develop as a professional, right? Another way to do that is exposure, right? And exposure could be by reading books, it could be by taking on projects. Here's something I would encourage everyone here to do. As much as you can, find an architect whom you really admire, yeah, and then do me a favor. Find like maybe 2 or 3 of their most complex projects and try to recreate it. So you could go online, find information, find references, and then use images to rebuild whatever it is they created. Of course, this is where you sort of like start to test your understanding of tools and technology, right? And here's another thing I would like to say. When you go to the hospital and you say, my stomach is paining me, it would be very irresponsible of the doctor to now go, oh, congratulations, you're pregnant. It doesn't make sense. It's dull. You would look at the doctor and go, is this guy okay? The very crux of being an architect is your ability to investigate. I'll give an example. Sometime around May last year, someone came to me and said, hey, this parcel in Metama, they had done a design for us initially. We had ended up with 22 units on 2 blocks, right? And it was basically basement plus 5 floors across 2 blocks. And we ended up with 22 units of 2 and 3 bedroom units, right? And I asked a very simple question. Hey, what is this site to you? And he said, I'm trying to build a legacy. I want to build something that would provide wealth for me and my children. And I said, very simple. Who is your target audience? And he said, expatriates. And at that very moment, I told him, I said, the way you're designing this thing cannot work. The way white people live is different from how we Africans live. A white man doesn't mind an open plan kitchen. A Nigerian cannot do that. A way will scatter the place when you have guests, right? And if you're thinking expatriates, another thing you should be considering are amenities, a gym, a spa, laundromat. These are things that they are used to having in their buildings. None of the initial example you had no such thing. Or additionally, right, on top of all of this, let me even throw this question here. Who knows what building efficiency is? Anybody? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sorry, you said building what?
Efficiency.
Okay, what building efficiency is?
Yeah.
Okay, let me try that. Um,
I
I
would
would
love to
say
hear
that
from Adetunji because he was the one who said he mostly works with developers, and they're the ones who understand or appreciate building efficiency the most. Geoffrey, you want to go?
Hello, good evening. Okay, so if I should answer this, I think I'll basically just say building efficiency is basically how a building has been able to serve the particular purpose for which it was designed for.
Mm.
Yeah, that's just.
All right. So just to save us time, building efficiency is a ratio of sellable versus utility units. So if I have a building, how much of it can I sell? How much of it is utility? Utility is spaces like lift cores, right? Staircases, um, generator rooms, service ducts. If you have a building, let's say the floor plate is 1,000 square meters, all of us here, well, let me not say all of us, for those who understand, if you're doing 1,000 square meters and say you're building at 850,000 naira per square meter, does anybody have a calculator? Punch it for me. So let's see. I do have a calculator. 850,000 multiplied by 1,000. I'm being lazy. I think it should be 8.5 or 85 million. 850 million, beg your pardon. It means it's going to cost you 850 million to build that space. Now, if you have a building efficiency of 60%, what that means is you can only lease or command fees on 60% of that building, right? Ultimately, what that means is you have 850 multiplied by 0.4. You spent 340 million naira building something or building spaces people cannot sell. And your building efficiency is a function of how you arrange your spaces. How do you arrange spaces? Do you arrange them around the corridor? Are you just putting things everywhere and then your entire building is a lobby? Are you just putting lift here, elevator there, and then at the end of the day, your spaces are so far apart that you cannot command premium on all those spaces? Or would you say your building is at an maybe say a 90% building efficiency where you can command fees on like 90% of what you've built? Newsflash, this is the reason why a lot of buildings are expensive, because the person has spent so much money building an asset, and like 40% of that building is lobbies, toilets, and corridors, right? It is not to say that you should not have all those systems, because of course they enable the building run, they enable the property to function the way it should, but you should be methodical or scientific where you can, because you want to say this should hit a profitable margin. And back to what we were saying, I told him, your guys are being wasteful. For context, you're having a 2-bedroom unit on 350 square meters. It is not making sense. Now, if you were doing high end or super luxury, that would have made sense. If you were doing standalone units, that would have made sense. On 360 square meters, I can fit 2 bedrooms, 2 units of 2 bedrooms, and they'll be comfortable. And he looked at me like, this is voodoo. You're saying rubbish. And the 22 units that he had, the developer here now, was set across ground plus, what was it now, 6 or 7 floors? And I took the design, went, and came back with, of course, after having the conversations with him, I came back with ground plus 5. And on ground plus 5, I fit 30 units comfortably and they were spacious. And he said in his life, he didn't think this was possible. All he knew was staircase in the middle, 1 unit to the left, 1 unit to the right, carry it and go up, right? And because of that, instantly he's like, I have this project. Come look at this. I have this. Come look at this. He wasn't paying me because I knew how to use Revit. As a matter of fact, he didn't even care what tool I used. In that moment, all he knew was I had 22 units on 7 floors. This guy came back with 30 units on 5 floors, right? He has saved me construction costs. he has reduced waste in the building and he's giving me more units, meaning more money. I cannot mess with this person. I need to hold him. He will make me more money. And this is sort of like, that's like one example. Can I think of another one? Ultimately, it starts to show that these are the areas you shine as an architect. I think another place you can shine as a professional or stand out is when you develop your ability to look at things and prevent expensive mistakes, which is basically what BIM is supposed to do for us, right? And unfortunately, we are underutilizing these tools that we have because I look at a lot of drawings, I see how people use Revit, and I'm like, some of you, and God will judge you on the last day. And I pray that God judges me first so that I can come and stand in line and watch your own judgments. You use Revit like you're using AutoCAD. You do ground floor here, you copy the slab. You do first floor here, you copy the slab. You do the... Why? Why? Right? The very reason why you were given that tool was so that you can simulate an actual construction process and start to make mistakes that you would make on site on the computer. Does anybody know why? Because on the computer, it doesn't cost you any money. On site, expensive. Sorry, on site, mistakes are expensive. Mistake costs time. Mistake costs licenses. Mistake costs reputation. Mistake costs relationships, right? So it's best to make those mistakes on the computer so that you can reduce errors on site. Now, how are you able to look at a building and say, okay, the structural engineer has sent his drawing. Let me recreate his structure using Revit and then coordinate with my architecture to see, is anything clashing? Do we have beams going through anywhere? Are there columns that are reducing the sizes of doors? Do you have beams in the way of where service or mechanical ducts should pass through? People would pay you more, even in the industry, if you are able to evaluate problems like that. Not necessarily that you are able to use software tools. Am I making sense so far? Right. And another completely off center or off the sphere of the conversation, which is kind of like why I read all the things I read, was there are a lot of infrastructure / developmental problems that we have in our continent. We cannot be focusing on things like visualization only. If that is your thing and that's what you're passionate about, please, by all means. But we have issues surrounding waste management. We have issues surrounding transportation. We have issues surrounding security. We have issues surrounding agriculture. Are you, as a professional who was trained to learn how to build systems that would solve problems, can you look at any of these industries and say, oh, if only we did X, Y, Z differently, it would improve 1, 2, 3, which would affect people's productivity. It might even go as far as affecting or improving general overall quality of life, which has a way of spilling over into the GDP of the country, yada, 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 yada. Can you sit down and solve problems that are outside of brick and mortar? For those of us who are in Abuja, I don't even want to talk about Lagos because first, Lagos, for you to know that how bad it is, the city has body odor on its own. So let's not even go there. Let's come here down to Abuja. If you go down, for people who know places like Gwarimpa, I think it's 3rd Avenue now, it's basically a dump. Like you pass and there's a huge pile of rubble and waste. Right next to it, people are selling and buying. And what are they selling? Food. There has been an increase in the frequency of food poisoning. I have experienced it. As a matter of time, there was a time last year, I was so glad to have made it to the following morning because I thought I was going to die the previous night. What happened? Food poisoning. But systems-wise, you as an architect is one of the few people who can walk into a space and know, hey, you shouldn't have waste right next to where you should be selling food. This is a planning problem. Can you call or go to development control and say, CEO, this thing that they've done here is not working. The flip side is, let's be honest, we're in Nigeria. You can blow the whistle on something and they'll collect the whistle and slap you with it. But can you look at problems, right, and prefer solutions that would benefit society? Can you prefer solutions to problems that society did not even know they had? It is in doing so that, okay, I'm trying to solve a problem on waste. I need to map the places where I need to map the hotspots or the dump spots in maybe Abuja. Okay, in doing so, maybe I would use this tool, or I would use this tool, or I would use this tool. That is what is important. Not, okay, let me learn Revit, then I'll go out there and make money. No, it is an expression. Back to our analogy about the medical doctor. If you went to the hospital, you would realize they would ask questions. And at the end of the day, they could tell you, oh, okay, you just need to go home and sleep. You're overworking, you're stressed. Or they can say, hey, you need to come in for surgery. Or they could say, hey, you need to take medication. It is the same thing with architecture. Architecture is evaluating a problem. Newsflash, the drawings you produce are the medicine, or the, sorry, excuse my terrible English. That was bad. That was really bad. But the solutions or the drawings you produce, right? It is you preferring solution. That is the medication you are giving to the client. Take, this is what will solve what is wrong with you. It is not what is the architecture in itself, right? Another sphere of, which is something that I've recently noticed, and I think is like gray area or a space that people should look more into, is facility management. What stops you from, as construction is being done, you are adjusting your BIM model so that by the time the project is handed over, you can also hand in a facility management model for the client to use. In that model, you can embed data that says you have to change the paint every 2 years. You have to change the windows every 50 years. You have to change your POP every so and so years. And this is all data that can be put into your model, right? You need to step out of the basic ways to do things. And again, it is where here's a little tip. The ideal client is someone who has a serious problem and doesn't have time. They will pay you anything to solve it. The more painful the problem, the higher you can command. And in solving important enough problems, you need to be very grounded. You need to be grounded in economics. You need to be grounded in finance. You need to be grounded in politics. You need to be grounded in systems. You need to be grounded in architecture. You need to be grounded in cities. You need to be grounded in cultures. You need to be able to walk into a space and in a few minutes understand things. And for me, everyone is different. But I found what works is you need to read like a mad person, right? You need to commit to hours and hours daily learning and building your mental faculty. Something my mentor always says, your ability to provide solutions as a professional is a function of your information horizon. Basically, what it means is someone who only knows Pinterest would solve a problem differently from someone who has read things like sustainability or global warming, social issues or gender wars or gender imbalance, or you would approach things differently. One would be more methodical, right? And the other is just going to be casual and superficial. One of them will be rewarded more. One of them would never get a call back from the client. So I think I've spoken a whole lot up until this point. So I'm probably just going to do something now where we open the mic and just have a conversation between myself and you guys. You could ask questions, you could drop contributions. If it says something it is that I said that you don't agree with, you can let me know. But before I do that, someone said something, and I asked you guys to help me type on the group. Why is a brief important? Yes, and it was in relation to when someone said, when I asked the question, what's the first question you do? It wasn't a brief. Why is budget important? That was supposed to be the question. And there are times where the solution you provide is what determines the budget, right? And that's why I had to say I would come back to it afterwards. There are instances where you have to build a framework, and on the back of that framework, that's what they're going to kick and give to maybe what and do front-end engineering design, master plan, business case, whatever you name it, and then scope the project and say, okay, this is what it would cost to do so and so. The reason why I think it's important to make that distinction is because a lot of us, to no fault of ours, are used to thinking about solutions on a 3-bedroom scale. You have to understand that as an architect, you would eventually, depending on the type of projects you work on and how you build yourself, hit a point where you're working on projects on a master plan scale, right? And when you're doing something of that nature, sometimes those type of clients are not clients who are looking for, but they're even looking for, oh, see, I want to do something. I don't even know what the thing is, but I have space, plenty space. Come and prefer or architect a solution for me or a framework, right? And which is why I'm saying there are instances where it is on the back of what you do that a budget will be established. And again, this is a function of critical thinking. It is your ability to understand that before I say this thing, I need to know that there are different scales of doing things and architecture, and budget only plugs into one of them. Ultimately, that was why I asked someone to write that down for me so that I could come back to it. But then again, open floor. Questions, contributions,
Hi, everyone. Good evening. And thank you so much, Joseph, for the talk. Your name is Joseph, right?
any which one. I sure know it's me you're talking to.
Okay. So thank you very much. I just wanted to, give you a bit of a jab when you were yabbing Lagos, because me, I'm based in Lagos, so I don't know. What do you do to you? We
Hmm.
are doing great. We are doing great work in Lagos. I mean, there's a serious problem of our urban architecture, our urban design, and it spills over into our architecture. So I guess that's where a lot of the problems are, because Lagos is smelly and all the. But it has been a very.
If you say Lagos is stolen, doesn't it mean that Lagos has body odor?
No, Lagos doesn't have body odor. It's just, but there are different sources of body odor. It can be genetic, it can be from poor hygiene. Our own body odor, if you can call it body odor, is from poor
It's
hygiene.
infrastructural.
Yes, now. And it can
And
be solved. If it was genetic now, it probably cannot be solved.
there's a body odor inside.
But Lagos is one of the best cities not even one of the best. It is the best
It's
city in Nigeria. So it's a stretch for you to be insulting the best city in your country.
best city based on what metric now?
Based on any metric, based on
Really?
financial metric, based on infrastructure metric.
Really?
But I don't want to get bogged down in that. We can have
Hmm.
that discussion on WhatsApp.
Okay.
So, generally speaking, this has been a very interesting conversation. I've really enjoyed listening to you speak about really thinking deeply about what it is to be an architect. I've been doing that recently because, to be very honest, most of my classmates, I mean, I graduated my BS in 2019, and most of my classmates are not doing architecture anymore. So it's always interesting when somebody says, you are still doing architecture, like, well, I know I am here. I know the importance of what I'm doing, and it has a purpose. It connects to
A
my own
mission.
deep seated. Yes, exactly. So it connects to that deep seated purpose of imposing order in society. I mean, that's one of the things I think
Hmm.
architecture is good for. If you look at it holistically, we architects generally, or people in the built environment, because I don't like to think of architects as just a solo practitioner. We work with in consult with a lot of people, including finance people and all the likes. So we are not just people that draw stuff on paper. In fact, you hear from a lot of seasoned professionals that drawing is kind of it's a language you communicate in, but it's not primarily what we do. What we do is problem solving and decision making.
Hmm.
So in those broad strokes that you think about architecture, it is extremely important, because I was listening to is it BIG architect Biakingels talk on YouTube recently, and he was talking about how architecture is we are shaping place, we are shaping society, but we're also shaping memories. We are shaping a lot of things. And most of the buildings that are built currently will be used for the next maybe 100 years if you are building sustainably anyway. So we are shaping the generations to come. So it's a huge responsibility. It's a I don't like to call it a calling, but if you look at it in line of I'm a pastor, I shape people's lives, I lead them to Christ and all the like, or I'm a imam, I give people spiritual guidance. Architects shape one of the most important parts of human existence, that is buildings. We shape how people live in it. We shape how the buildings look. We shape how they make you feel. So it's for me. I just want to say architecture is a very is more encompassing than just drawings. It's more encompassing than those tools. Those tools help us do what we do, but they are not the architects. They are not the decision maker. They are not the ones that have to juggle between using this or using that there. So this is a very interesting conversation, and it really ties into what I've been thinking about recently. So thank you very much, and thank LearnArchi for this platform.
Three things I want to say, and it was a function of some of the things you said, right? I really want to disabuse everybody's mind from thinking of architecture just in terms of buildings, right? And I'll ask a very simple question. Can anybody here, I'll drop a bet, 50 grand to anybody who could give me an answer. Tell me one sphere of human development that doesn't need the services of an architect.
There is none.
There's none?
There is no sphere now. Every sphere needs.
Good. So then you understand that architecture is not just preferring solutions that end up as buildings, right? When Hyperloop wanted to do a master plan, who did they call? An architect. When Dubai wanted to do a master plan and rethink their future, who did they call? An architect, right? So please don't just think of architecture in terms of brick and mortar or buildings only. There are times where at the end of the day, the solution you are providing is a framework document. It might not even be a building, right? It could just be that from beginning to the end of the project, all you're doing is jumping between Excel and Microsoft Word, right? The second thing you said was I watched a podcast yesterday. I don't know if you guys watched Diary of a CEO. On the episode, the guest was Kevin Hart, and he spoke about something and said, when something is hard, it is all the more reason why you should do it, because the difficulty of that thing itself removes competition for you by default. Here's how he explained it. He said, if someone placed a bet and said he's going to get the best, what do they call these guys now in baseball, who threw or who fielded the ball? Pitcher. If you could get the best pitcher to throw a pitch, and then if you could bat that pitch, you would get $1 million free. The catch, however, is everybody is going to come and line up and do it tomorrow. He said on the first day, there might be 1 million people on the line, right? And here's what is going to happen. Everybody is going to hope that they hit that pitch on the first try. But it's not going to happen to everybody. Now, the problem is because you waited in a queue with plenty people, when it gets to your turn, the default behavior is when you miss, you go home. But he's like, what you are supposed to do is when you miss, you walk your way back to the line and you start again. And he says, over time, the number of people on the queue would shrink, right? And you can walk back of the line quicker and start much faster. Why? Because your competition is gone. And what would happen is eventually you will strike gold, right? What am I saying? People falling out of the industry or leaving the industry, yes, it is sad. On the other side, it means that there is opportunity for people who stay and decide to do the right thing. The third thing I wanted to say was, in this part of the world, we very often only think of the architect as a person, whereas if you want to play in the big leagues, you have to start understanding the architect as a legal entity. If the architect as a legal entity, please, if you can look for this book, The Architects in Practice. It is by the RIBA. Again, The Architects in Practice. I encourage everyone to read that book. The architect as a legal entity, underneath it, you can have engineers, you can have lawyers, you can have doctors, you can have environmental scientists. I encourage everybody, go to Foster and Partners website, go to the careers column, and then look at all the professionals they have in their office. There are doctors there. What are they doing? Consulting and giving advice. Advice when it comes to wellness, advice when it comes to designing hospitals, advice when it comes to environmental issues. When you have an architect as a legal entity with all of these disciplines underneath it, you can do marvelous things. So, my point is, as you grow or develop as a professional, grow and develop and look to collaborate with people outside other industries because, again, that is how you start to stand out from even those who are standing out. There's a reason why you as a person would really struggle to compete with a firm like Foster and Partners because of the portfolio of skills that they have in-house. But when they come to you as the legal entity, Foster and Partners, right? So those are the three things I wanted to say. And it came up as a function of what you were saying. Anybody else want to go?
Okay, good evening, Mr. Joseph.
Good evening, Mr. Osaruma.
Okay, so I would just love to ask a question. How do you manage in your tight schedule as an architect? So this question, I believe it speaks many other person's minds. How do you manage your tight schedule as an architect to find time to read voraciously across various spheres?
How do I manage my time? Do you want the truth? Do you want the honest truth? I am doing, excuse my French, a very shitty job. I've always said this thing. I am not the standard. I don't encourage anybody to live how I live. So, how I do what I do is I've removed a lot of things that I consider unnecessary. Please bear in mind, this is me, this is my resolve. It is not a blueprint or a standard. It is just how I do things. I don't club, I don't party, I barely do hangouts. And what that does is it gives me more time to do more things. I wake up early, I walk more, I stay up longer. So I'm able to achieve more. Now, as I've gotten older, I think my responsibilities have increased. Because of that, I've gotten busier. So my ability to read has diminished slightly. So now what I do is I listen to podcasts as I drive. Instead of maybe looking at reading hardcover books, I download audiobooks, put them on my phone. As I'm driving, I'm listening. What that does is I'm learning. As I'm working, I'm watching a podcast on the side. That's how I learn. Outside of that, I've begun scheduling with calendars, right? Using reminders and so on and so forth. I think another thing I do is I write things down. So in the morning, I would sit and say, okay, these are the tasks I want to complete by so and so time. And it is very important that when you're scheduling your tasks, you make sure that they are time bound. I can't remember what it is called now. Is it Frankenstein's law? I can't, but there's a law that says the amount of time you allocate to a task is the amount of time it will take you to do it. What it means is if you say you're going to use 3 hours to do something, you will use 3 hours to do it. If you say you're going to use 1 hour to do that same thing, your brain will look for a way to get it done in 1 hour. So what I do is my tasks are time bound. And because of that, there are times where I get things done much quicker. Another thing that helps me is I work with people a lot. So if on a project someone is going to pay me 100 naira, I'm going to take 40 naira and give somebody to handle something else so that I can free myself up to do more things. And then on the days I'm drowning, I'm just drowning. That's just the truth. And I'll be lying to you if I say that there are days where I don't struggle. But instance, today I was very tired. I actually just wanted to come back and sleep, but I couldn't because I was like, okay, you know what? I need to prepare for what this meeting is. I started working on the notes around 5:30, right? So those are like, I don't know. I think hopefully that helps. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
I'm seeing Odufa's hands up.
Good evening again. Thank you for everything that you said. I've learned a lot personally. Um,
Me too.
Given the scale of, you said something about the infrastructural and developmental challenges in our country and
Mhm.
even across the continent, and the focus on just pure aesthetics, right, is
Mhm.
not, just misplaced. So I
Mhm.
find myself conflicted about the current shift, towards what we describe as, culturally rooted or contextual design, right?
Mhm.
So when we look at cities like Lagos or Abuja, like you have rightly said, with the
Mhm.
whole cities having body odor, it's clear that, let me not say it's clear because I wasn't, alive then, but I wouldn't say that was the initial plan, I just feel
Mhm.
like there was no vision and there was no growth, like there was no evolution, into what we now have, right? So we have a lot of,
Mhm.
dump sites, even Port Harcourt where I live,
Mhm.
um, coming from the airport, you can imagine expatriates, like, people that come around for tourism, just leaving
Mhm.
the airport, they are met with, dump sites, a very beautiful and magnificent one, So in projects like Marco Polo, where like they're even doing like some sort of like redevelopment, development, as they will say, there's a tendency to sort of like repackage culture visually, right? I don't know if maybe some of you have seen it. So you have the brick finishes, the earthy materials, what we call the vernacular aesthetics, as a way of responding to context, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes for me, it feels like we're just replacing one aesthetic language with another, right? So my question is, how do we ensure that we're designing actually for context, right? Addressing, the systematic and infrastructural problems rather than just rebranding it under the guise of culture. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Perfectly. Um, there's something I learned, was it 2 years ago? The answer to your problem is in the problem in itself. What it is saying is the answer to your question is in the question you asked. He said, how do we design frameworks to ensure that we are not replicating the problems? When you said that, I was like, bingo, she has answered herself. It is being intentional. Unfortunately, it's sad to say, don't quote me anywhere, Sha, but we are very anyhow in this country. So it's very hard to say, oh, you would design a framework and expect that people would follow it. But basically, cities are for people or plants or ecosystems, right? I don't see when last was anybody designing a public building and then you heard that there was a period where they called the public to say, okay, what do you guys feel like are missing from buildings? What would you like to see differently? Yada yada. No, nobody does that. Is how many square meters am I going to get? How can I sell it? Right. So some of these things is just, and I think this is also something I've learned as a professional in recent times. If you want to do the right thing, you kind of have to suffer for it. What do I mean? Very often, there's the tendency you might not be paid to think as deeply as you would. It would be the human side of you that has a conscience that would say, oh, let me consider this, let me consider this, let me consider that. Brick doesn't matter when you don't design how around how people live. And I'll give a very, very basic example. Like most history of different tribes, you would find that we are a very communal people. Does anybody think that the idea of terraces are built around the understanding of community? Anybody? So ultimately, I think we're just copying systems from places where, and then just bringing it down. I think it's even to the point where someone will say, at one point in your life, you will hear this thing. I went to China. I saw this thing. They did it like this. The building, the facade was black. I want my own in Sokoto. Then you will die inside that house. It's heat that will kill you, right? So it is just the tendency to copy things and do it without any care in the world. But I think my answer is very simple. I noticed something recently. It's anyone, it could be different for people, but when driving and I get to it, the light turns red and everybody keeps going. It is always a function of the first driver to stop. And then everybody's like, okay, let's stop. So I think what I learned from that is sometimes you just have to do the right thing so that people can see you and say, okay, it is possible to do the right thing. Oh, we should be doing the right thing. Because I think as a people, we've become desensitized to a whole lot of things. Any harmness is engraved in our system. So it is something Frank Gehry said is there are no small projects, there are only small approaches or small-minded approaches to projects. So it's in every single thing you do. How can I consider community? How can I consider the future I want to see? What is the tiniest bit of intervention I can do on this project? And then stack it up. One day you're going to be a boss. You're going to open your own firms and you're going to have employees under you who would watch and see, okay, this is how she works. And they're going to go out and basically they're like a piece of you that have that discipline that you have built over time. They would carry that discipline and build it over time also. And I'm guessing, hopefully, maybe a few years down the line, we would have had enough people who have learned how to do the right thing under people who are doing the right thing around plenty places. And then we're all doing the right thing and being considerate. But ultimately, short answer, empathy, number one. Number two, be bold to do the right thing, even when you're standing alone, right? And I say this to people a lot. You can agree with me or you can disagree. I really don't care. One of the best ways I judge people's character is how do you behave around traffic lights? Do you stop when the light is red and nobody's watching? Because to me, it is a measure of can you do the right thing even when nobody is watching you, even when there's no reward? Did I answer your question or did I just babble? How you do for? You there? I think she has dropped off. So maybe like when she comes back on, she could speak as to whether or not it is I answered that question. Maybe I'll take someone else's question or comment now. All right, shall we? I think your hands are up. Sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. I apologize.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
So now, when it comes to architecture in Nigeria, studying architecture, I a student currently. I'm 300 level, and the journey. I'm not going to lie to you. The journey has been a lot because the like studying architecture demands many things from you. First of all, it demands like you to be financially, let's say, financially but honestly, you can't do architecture without having the finance to complete them. By the time you ink pen, buy clutch pencils, buy, you keep on buying as they spoil, as they finish, you keep on buying.
Uh-huh. If the network is poor, I think maybe you should type your question in the chat so we could read it out.
I think I'll probably do that because
No, okay, let's hear you. Let's hear you. Because it's sounding
so maybe yeah, like it's bound to still disconnect because the place I am, the Wi-Fi.
Does anybody else have a question, concern, comments, rebuttal?
Okay, good evening. I have a question.
Hey, brother, what's up?
So I don't thank you for a very insightful question. Being such a number of things that what you get into. Mm, So, I think
Are you in the same class with Shawi?
organizing.
Don't mind me, I'm just being silly. Your network is glitching.
So, not my trust them and we mentioned a number of things about how as architects that you need and software efficiency. If you
I'm so sorry. The network is bad. I can't hear you. Can you type your question as well? I'll be reading the chat.
Okay. Pending when you read the chat, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Okay, so I just have, I don't know whether I'll call it a pushback or let's say it's just an observation anyway. You
Mhm.
mentioned something about the way we used to live communally and now we're building terraces everywhere. There's a part of me that understands the need to like kind of draw closer to our history and the way we used to live, but there's also the reality of changing socioeconomic
Revolution.
and social and changing dynamics of cities and like so. In a city like Lagos,
Mm.
communalism is already out of the window, no matter where you live. Even if you live in the suburbs, you live
Mm.
in the city center, communalism is out of the window. And this largely is a function of the capitalistic nature of our society. So there's a need for architects to actually really grapple with the idea of communalism when we are designing. But we also have to also grapple with the idea that society is changing and how best can we design for the changing society. So it's not really a pushback because you're right, you're spot on. And when you say we've kind of deviated from the way we used to live, and definitely has effects on our psychology and the way we relate to each other.
Mhm.
But there's also a part of it that is kind of pessimistic that sees it as inevitable with the way society is structured. So it kind of ties into the idea that architects have to kind of shape society the way we want it to be, but we also have to grapple with society the way it is. So it's kind of a philosophical shampoo, like whatever you take from that.
Demand creates supply, supply creates demand. Speaking of
Yeah, it's a two problems. So
Ife Olua, you've not said anything.
where exactly is this?
That is Ife Olua Ola Tubosun. I'm calling people now. Izuchukwu Nwosu. My dear, you've not said anything. Omiwade, Salewa, all of you. You guys have questions or we start wrapping? Questions, comments, pushback. So where they go this night?
Please, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, man.
Okay, so thank you very much for tonight's session, sir. Um, one of the things that stood out for me was where you talked about as architects, like creating, excuse me, when you talked about waste management, something around waste management, and I I live I live
Again, please don't no need to address me with Sir Jerry. All of us here are mates. You know, try. Okay.
We are not made to.
Who is that? Whose voice was that? Really? As a student of architecture, how do I begin to think of architecture and also design as not just drawings, buildings, or 3D images? How do I start thinking about solving problems design, what is the best approach to a design brief as a professional, and how do you start cultivating that culture early as a student? Um, I would advise the first thing you do is figure out the type of professional you want to be, then find someone who is close to or resembles that person, and then go and study under them, because you would learn a whole lot and it will help you to avoid certain mistakes. Here's another thing, and this is not me teasing or making fun of people who freelance, right? But I think there's also the room for tutelage. You need to learn under someone first. What that does for you, it gives you access to working on certain projects. It gives you access to people of a certain profile. And over time, you would find that your development would grow rapidly. Another thing you should do for yourself is read voraciously, read a lot about anything and everything. It would be your interest. It could be that you love to read about music, you love to read about art, you just read a whole lot, but then make sure that it is tied to important issues or details. Another thing you could do, like I said, is find an architect you admire, take one, two, or three of their projects, give yourself a challenge. This year, you would recreate one or two of them. So it could be that you go on and find reference images, and then from that reference image, you will build maybe a Revit file and then visualize it, or you would learn how to do a particular facade or something, right? Because doing all these things over time, it stacks up. And eventually everything starts to come into play. It's like your brain is stretching. And at some point, you just feel things clicking faster. You are thinking faster. You are seeing things better. You just eventually hit a threshold, and then you're like in the zone. So, read more, be informed, find a mentor, and then challenge yourself to learn something new every single time you can, every single day on every single project you get. Ola, I hope that helps. Shall we?
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Even. Yes, sir. Oh, sure, you can hear you.
Okay. So basically, what I want to bring to light is that most architecture schools, or at least most that I'm aware of, still demand that the students there do all the designs, like go through the whole design process strictly on paper. Most of them, most of them discourage students from, okay, not most, but let me just say, in my own experience, some of the lecturers that I've met along my line of study, they discouraged digitizing like your work, your designs. They discouraged presenting your works digitally. Is that if we're giving a design brief now, a project to plan for the semester, when we bring your work now on Revit or on ArchiCAD, on whatever software you use, they'll just be saying, why are you doing this? Your mates are working on paper. Or some of them will just straight up refuse to see you. Telling you things like, I want to see this in your book first, rather than in the software. And mind you, you might have started your design sketch from a book. You might have started drafting out your design from a book. But along like the design and the design process, it has stages. Along stages, at any point in time when you bring it to them, they'll always send you back, tell you to bring back your work on paper. And I always think, okay, if you're making us get used to the idea of designing on paper, what do you expect us to do when we finally graduate and are in the real, like the professional world? How do you expect us to adapt rapidly? Because now, as I'm just, there are many students, many final year students that not properly, they don't possess they don't possess adequate skills in all this design software. And I understand that it's not all architects that work digitally, professional world. Some of them still do their works on paper. But if Revit, I feel like Revit was created to solve the problem of the bulkiness and difficulties of working with paper. So why lecture schools not accept and encourage students to use digital means of design? Why do most Nigerian architecture schools run away from using all these digital platforms for their designs? Because it makes like the work a lot easier. Let's In my school we use Revit, and thankfully one of my lecturers is present in this meeting. We use Revit in our school for most students use Revit. Let me just put it like that. So this particular lecturer I'm talking about, he takes us in the course that teaches us Revit. And most of the time, our works are submitted online virtually. We have never, I don't remember us printing any assignments out. And when it comes to cutting down on waste, the amount of money students spend on paper, on ink pens, all those things, the price will be cut down. This is referencing that financial aspect of studying architecture I mentioned earlier. It will reduce the amount of money that students have to spend on material per semester, because you can't guarantee that if I spend, let's say, 5,000 naira now buying paper, you can't guarantee that each sheet will be perfect, that I won't make mistakes, that my roommate will not shift my hand or something on the sheet. You can't guarantee that. So why are we running away from Revit and other design software that will literally make it easier for us to design, for us to view the design, like the 3D aspect of design, for us to actually walk through the design, to view the design before it's even built? And the Rev itself, the Rev, when we design digitally, it is easier for lecturers to review our designs. Like now, you can use Revit collaboration. It's easier for our lecturers to review without even having to be present at that moment with us. Lecturers can make modifications to the design, like leave notes for you. Why do architectural schools run away from it? And maybe I'm not just aware if someone is doing something about it, but it's no one bringing this out to the public. Yes,
My brother, how many public again? All of us are public. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't know that. I don't think there's rarely anyone who hasn't gone through the same frustration. I can't tell you why they do what they do. I don't have the powers to change the curriculum. All I can give you is an answer. You may or may not like the answer. That was what I did, and that was what worked for me. I knew the kind of student I was, right? And once I was in class and I understood the lectures, I didn't have to read. I'll remember it. So what I would do was I never skipped lectures. I would be present and learn what I needed to learn. That way I didn't have to go back and read on what I learned in school. So when I went home, I would take courses on Revit, courses on Rhino, courses on computational design, and I was building these skills. So you could say I was running two curriculums, right? I was running the classroom or the school or what the university wanted. And then when I would go home, or when I would go home, I would be running a curriculum that was developing what it is that the industry needed. Was it expensive? Yes, because it was demanding. But dare I say, I didn't regret it, because right after school, I think the first interview I went for, before the time was even up, the guy was like, "Leave this thing you're doing and come, let's discuss your salary." I graduated with the right skills. So, and this is a lifelong hack. You must have a parallel curriculum that is self-driven. And the importance of that parallel curriculum that is self-driven is to keep your mind fresh and keep you relevant. So it might not even be just something that you do in school. Even when you graduate, you will realize that there's so much that you should know that you don't know. It doesn't matter how good a school you went to. So you have to find a way to, yes, the world is not fair. I empathize with you, right? But the thing about excuses is they're very valid. And if you give in to them, you're never going to do what you're supposed to do. All I would encourage you to do is, The lecturers don't want you to do it. Fine. They cannot come and stop you when you're doing it in your house. Give them what they want. Give them pen and paper. I apologize. I understand architecture is expensive. My encouragement to you is one day it will get better for you, and you would look back on those difficult moments and you would just laugh and be like, oh, there was a time I couldn't afford paper. But look at me now. So you might just have to put up with the financial constraints. I pray and hope doors open for you. At the same time, you also have to have a parallel curriculum where you are teaching yourself things you need to know to be relevant. Do you know the good thing? You spotted this mistake before graduating. Imagine if after graduating, you now realize you didn't know Shingbai. Your mates will be around applying to jobs. That's when you have to go and start learning Rebis from whatever it is you would have had to. So you spotted an error. Try to start correcting it now. This might be difficult for you to believe or hear now, but at the same time, excuse your lecturers. The sad thing is sometimes they just don't know better.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Amy Joseph, for this session. Our time has been fast spent, and thank you for taking now time to share your thoughts and experiences with us today. I am sure that everybody enjoyed the session, and we really appreciate the honesty and the clarity that you have brought to this conversation. And I believe one key takeaway from this session today is that while software is important, so that's efficient use of these softwares, it is important how we think and how we approach problems and how we make decisions that truly shapes us as architects. And for everyone listening today, I really hope today encourages you to reflect not just on the tools, but also on learning and how to shape our minds and keep on developing. So I would say on behalf of LearnArchi, thank you all for joining us today and for being part of this learning community. We'll be sharing further updates and information and maybe recordings in the platform, so please stay tuned. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.